and welcome to the Law of Positivism podcast. I'm your host, Shireen, and I'm the creator of Law of Positivism. I'm here to help you on your spiritual and healing journey. I am a certified yoga and meditation teacher, a student of Chinese medicine, a doula, a Reiki practitioner, and a passionate, highly sensitive person. I want to use my knowledge to channel information and messages for you to grow on all levels. Hi, and welcome to the 9th episode of the podcast. I am so grateful that you're here and that you're sharing your energy here, and I'm really excited to share some insights into today's topics, which is going to be about the union of the divine feminine and masculine. And I have a beautiful guest this week. Her name is Emma Ljung, and she's an energy healer, a Vedic astrologer, an intuitive psychic, and she creates very beautiful sacred smudge fans, which you might have seen on my page, and also art, and she has so much knowledge and so much wisdom. And we do talk about Atlantis and Lemuria, which is a very interesting area that we cover today, and we tap into some of ancient Egypt as well. So I really hope that this episode resonates with you, and if it does, please leave a review on iTunes. If you leave a review, you can take a screenshot and send it to me, and I will give you an oracle card reading. All of your reviews and ratings are really helpful for other people to find the episodes and the podcast. So I'm really grateful for all of you who have left a review, and I read all of them. So thank you so much, and just enjoy this episode. Hi, Emma.
Hi.
Podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you here. I'm really excited about this conversation. And I would love for you to start telling the listeners how you stay mindful and present.
Well, I have listened to a few of your podcasts, and I actually did think, what would I say to this? And honestly, the answer is kind of, how do I stay mindful and present? Well, I stay mindful and present, basically. Meaning that what would I need in any given moment? If it's, do I need to be emotionally aware, or do I need to let out emotions? Do I need to change my thought patterns? Do I need to talk to somebody about something, vent or release or move, or whatever is needed in the actual present time, because it can be so different what is needed. So it's a hard question to answer, because it depends wholly on what is actually happening for me. So it can be anything.
Yeah, that's a good thought, actually, because it depends on what's happening. That's very true.
Yeah,
So,
I was like, I can't really answer this, because I just did, but in a very short, concise way, because it's so dependent on the situation. Sometimes you need to meditate and calm yourself, and sometimes you need to honor what is there and feel and let it out and cry or rage or write or whatever you need to do. And sometimes you need boundaries and to not engage, and sometimes you need to engage. So it's like, just depending on the actual thing.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. And yes, so I would love for you to tell the listeners more about yourself and what you do, so we can get into the conversation.
Yes. Ooh, so exciting. Well, where to start? I'm from Sweden, as you are. Oh, wow. Where do you start? What I do, we can start there. What I do is I'm a therapist. I'm a energy therapist, healer, artist or creator. I do the sacred smudge fans, and a bunch of other things. There's so much, I don't know where to start. And astrology. I do astrology, Vedic astrology, which is a bit different from the Western. And lately I've been thinking a lot about and integrating a lot the differences and the union between the masculine and the feminine within myself, but also outside of myself. And I come from a pretty small town in Sweden. And I was born on summer solstice around midnight on full moon. And the full moon, if you have that with you, it's the sun and the moon is directly opposite each other, which basically creates a conflict within which is portrayed or being manifested outside of you as the parents are very different. They are dramatically opposed to each other. And what happens because of this is the child, i.e. me, will have to kind of choose one to integrate with. Because if you were to imagine the sun is in one direction and the moon in the other, so if you face the sun, then your back is to the moon. You don't see it. So it's like either or. And so that is something that's been very present with me and has kind of made, because of upbringing and things happening and not happening in my life, I rejected my own femininity a lot. I've had a lot of self-destructive behaviors and I was a very sensitive child. Very early on, I sensed and saw a lot of things in the darkness, so to speak, and felt quite unsafe. And there's also been, I'm just gonna see how I'm gonna create like a flow of it, so it's easy to go with it. But yeah, there's been a lot of turmoil, let's put it like that, in my upbringing. A lot of quite unsettling energies flowing around, both in the ethereal dimensions, in the dark, so to speak, but also in family situations of creating this instability. And growing up, I became very self-aware and, insecure, and developed, like many women do, eating disorders and self-hatred and self-loathing, which turned into very destructive behaviors, a lot of anger I directed towards myself, both due to my relationship with my mother and my father, but also because of this polarity of moon and sun, of me not being able to integrate with either one, basically. So on one hand, I really rejected being a woman. And you can go into all manner of past life things also if you want to, but if we just stay on this life. So I was very mean to myself, and really did not like having shapes, looking like a woman. I didn't understand it then. I do now, which is why I'm saying it. But at the time, I just hated myself and wanted to not have any shapes at all. I also, at the same time, was quite I didn't really understand men. I didn't understand the masculine energy. I was afraid of it, I've been afraid of it, I think, up until maybe a couple of years ago. And I'm 33 now. So that's been very present, and also been, what's the word in English? I'll keep going. But basically, I got into this vortex of being very destructive, of starving myself, of abusing myself in different ways. I was a dancer. I used to work out a lot. We were competing on high levels, on like world championships. So we trained a lot. And I didn't eat. I basically just drank coffee and smoked and went around and didn't like myself at all. I remember I used push pins, to like, because I couldn't cut myself because that would be visible. So I used that instead to really. So there was this huge rejection of my physical form, i.e., the feminine. And then you have the masculine energy that I could not understand at all either. So moving on, and I've encountered a lot of men that has not been very nice. So there's been some traumatic experiences, put it that way, that has sort of also made me fearful of expressing femininity, because then you attract men, which is kind of dangerous, and so on. That was like my pattern. And then what I've done, I've from studying and moving through therapy and all these different things, I think that a big initiation of this happened when I was in 2013, when I was attacked in my home and raped, and made me it turned everything upside down, because everything kind of broke into the open of masculine energy, feminine energy. And I, at the time, didn't know this, but I can see that it started then. And sort of it's interesting because it's moving into the 7-year cycle now, 2020, and I'm feeling the end of this initiation happening. So that was like the first big push from the universe, trying to show me what I need to see, what I need to heal. And I went very deep into therapy, but also it made me really even more reject femininity, because I felt, well, I can't really express this at all. And so I had a long time of moving closer to myself and really knowing what has happened, and working out trauma from childhood and everything, to see why I, on my part, attracted this energy. Why am I attracted to this man? Because it was the guy I was kind of flirting with. Because we're all basically responsible ourselves. I'm not saying that if you're a victim of sexual abuse, you're responsible. I'm not saying that. Very clearly want to state that I'm not saying that. But for me, I was like, I could see there's a pattern of being a victim. And where am I going with this? I have to just tune in to myself. I know I. Yeah. Anyway, so that was a start for me, really getting to know these polarities. And I remember, because this therapy that I'm working with and was training in at the time, there was a lot of clarity regarding you can absolutely heal from everything. It's an illusion that you can't. And I remember when talking to my lawyer that I had, that she told me that you will never ever be able to go out, and you will always be afraid of men, and you will always this and this. And I felt so strongly that this is not true. I cannot believe that this is what you're sitting and telling a person that has gone through this, because how am I supposed to heal if you're telling me that this fear is going to be a forever thing? Firstly, I knew it's not true, but also it kind of made me feel a fire within, kind of, I have to try to work to change this pattern, because it is a pattern present that you should be afraid of men, and it's not true. I know there are a lot of toxic masculinity out there, but there are also a lot of divine masculinity rising, and that's why it's important to talk about the polarities and why. What are they? What is the masculine energy actually about? What is the feminine energy actually about? Because a lot of the toxic masculine energy is actually the feminine trying to be masculine. That is what I've sort of come across. And the feminine is extremely powerful. The feminine is creation. The feminine is life. The feminine is this enormous, portal of creative energy that is birthing and upholding and then destroying everything. The earth is feminine. She has seasons, she has volcanoes, she has storms, she has tsunamis, beware of her, the goddess energy. And then you have the divine masculine, which is the sun or the consciousness, which is basically just holding space for the earth to bloom over and over and over again. And I had, and so that kind of sparked a fire that I have to understand this. But then there were a lot of years of, just working through my own stuff. And then I went to Glastonbury a year and a half ago, which is like the second part of this initiation. And up until that time, I had sort of gone very much into the masculine vibe. I dressed very masculine-like. I was very masculine in my approach to everything. Very harsh, very logical, very mind-focused, did not feel or did not want to feel. But when I went there, it had started to shift before, but I went there and I remember sitting on the Tor, which is, there's two hills there, and they're sort of talked about as feminine and masculine hills. There's the Weary Hill, which is more feminine, Mary Magdalene kind of, and it's the Tor, which is the Saint Michael line, and very masculine energy. And when I sat there, I felt the earth, and this is going to sound weird, but I felt the earth come up inside me as I sat there. And in that moment, I kind of clicked that I am a woman. It's almost as if I hadn't realized I was before, in a weird way. And it's hard to kind of describe, but it's like something connected that I need to have a masculine polarity to embrace my own femininity. Otherwise I have to have both, which is also a connection to these full moon things I describe, with there needs to be two of them. And having full moon energy, you have to really, you're able to, if you work with it, to hold the full feminine and the full masculine and really balance them. But it takes a lot of work. But that was kind of an insight of, we really need both. Otherwise, we can't really even have one of them. Well, for me, it was like that. It might be different, but the important thing is they are very much needed. And the typical masculine, I would say divine masculine, in its essence, which is starting to emerge, and I'm very happy to see that it is. I can see a lot of divine masculine popping up all over the place. It's very nurturing. It's very steady. It's consciousness. It's very gentle, but protective. Boundaries, discerning. There is a logic to it. There is a kind of, it's not that it's unemotional, but it's a way of looking at things with very deep clarity. As in, whereas the feminine is very much cycle based, it's very flowy, it can be very emotional. So the way you look at the thing, it's like the moon, it has its different phases. So the way you look at a thing will always be dependent on where you are in your cycle phase or in your emotional state when you're fully in the feminine. Therefore, you kind of have to be very mindful of where you yourself are. Whereas the masculine is always, the sun is always shining in the same way. If it's clouded, it's because it's cloudy on the earth. The sun is just as it is, you know. So that's kind of the divine masculine. And also the job for the masculine energy is to be there and nurture the feminine as she goes through her creative birthing process, really. And now I'm talking about within yourself now. It can also manifest outside, obviously, but you can be a woman and be very masculine and hold the divine masculine and have a partner, a man, that is very divine feminine. So the gender is not really, I'm not talking at all about sex or the genders. It's more on a subtle level. And so basically the feminine, the divine feminine, the way I see her, is very creative. It's the kundalini, it's the spiritual life force of everything, the birth and the destruction also. It's like all manner of emotional energy flowing, which is depicted in our life, which is depicted in our menstrual cycles. If you're a woman, it's depicted in Earth and her seasons. It's depicted in the climax of the sexual act, this enormous burst of energy that is very much the divine feminine, regardless of your gender. And the masculine is basically the protector of this process. So for your feminine to bloom, to be all that she can be within yourself, you need the divine masculine to put boundaries around her, to put protection around her, to be clear and discerning regarding what do you want and what do you need in your life. How are we supposed to do this? The logical mind of how are we supposed to create a framework for this enormous energy. And if you can tune into both of them and create a merging and the union with them, then you can absolutely manifest almost anything. This is my kind of view. And going into the kind of subject of timelines and representation of this and the human consciousness part of it, if we go way back to Atlantis and Lemuria, these ancient civilizations, they are basically representations of these two. The Atlantis civilization, which is the masculine energy, and Lemuria, which were very much the divine feminine energy. That was kind of those were the energies that were present or ruling or flowing. So Lemuria was the first of those two. If we go into just tuning into Lemuria as a space, because regardless if you believe that it existed or not, the energy of it exists. The archetype of Lemuria is the divine feminine. The archetype of Lemuria is still present and needs to be reawakened. And if you imagine the movie Avatar, that's kind of typical Lemuria. You know, this connection to the earth, the ability to see Earth's energy, the sacredness of life and the interconnectedness of all beings, which is also very present in like tribal, shamanic, native cultures that has been so brutally wiped out in a lot of ways. That's a very Lemurian way of being, honoring Earth, basically. And so Lemuria, where it was a lot of tribal based life. You know, you lived in small communities. You had these tribal communities where everybody was kind of equal. You followed the earth's seasons. You had a lot of collective energy. If you were to compare it to, like, I don't want to say socialism because it's a negative connotation of a word, but it's like everybody contributed. It was very much like the whole is a big thing. Everything is supposed to be because of the whole. The community is the most important thing, more important than your individual self. So you are a part of a big picture in Lemuria, which is very beautiful. But there was also the divine being held up as the masterful, as the most important thing. Like, women were very celebrated as keepers of life. We are the portal of life because we give birth. We bleed. There's also this deep spiritual connection to menstrual blood having, and you can see this in a lot of texts, that there's been this enormous spiritual and sacred worshipping of the menstrual cycles, and it being used as medicine and being used as fertilization of the land and everything. And it was very much focused on this, on women, and women were a lot of the time the leaders of the groups, and they were the priestesses and the shamans and the ones that were connecting to wisdom and held the answers and consciousness and all these things. And this is kind of, I think, the reason why Lemuria is so back on the on the market, so to speak. It's very present now, is because the divine feminine is trying to really emerge. We've sort of there's been a long time this divine feminine movement, but there's this also deep connection to the earth because she's kind of in need right now. But also to bring back this kind of sacredness. Lemuria, the way people lived back then is very close to nature. And there's this, we have to also talk about the crystal work, about the more you move towards, because this is a long period of time. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of years. So you kind of have to know that in the beginning of Lemuria, when it emerged and it was the very blessed time, of course it was magical. It was this, everything is so, there's shape-shifting people. There were tribes that were very connected to the water people. I know there are people who know that they've been mermaids and they've been dolphins. And the dolphins are very connected to Lemuria. Whales are very connected to Lemuria. Also mer people, because of this very connectedness to water and emotions and femininity again. And you can view this very symbolic, or you can see it as it has actually happened. You can choose whatever you like, but even nonetheless, it is very in the consciousness of humanity. It's an important part to know and to integrate because it has to do with the divine feminine. So the way people work with crystals, there's a lot of talk about the codings in crystals and Lemurian seed crystals. And they started to work with them to basically create energy and channel energy. But this really evolved a lot more in Atlantean times. So I'm going to go into that when I get to Atlantis more. But there are these Lemurian seeds that are buried, that because they use them to connect with Earth, they use them to connect with weather. And I have a few Lemurian seeds. I have 2 that are my babies. One of which I know I've met before. It's like when he came into my life, I was like, I know you. We've done this before. And it was the weirdest kind of connection. It was like I missed him. I say him because it's a masculine energy for sure. When I went out of my home, I was like, this is not with me. It feels like I'm half now when I don't have this crystal with me. And it sounds weird, maybe, but it's true. Because I do believe, I know we exist more than once in this universe. So the Lemurian seed crystals, what they can do now is basically connect you with past lives, past knowledge. They are ingrained with codings and energies of how they worked with them then, which is basically to channel energy and to create magic. Not magic as in sorcery, but as in working with the elements and the grid and earth. And a lot of crystals do have programming and coding in them. It doesn't have to be a Lemurian crystal, but they are very specific to this kind of energy, and they are often very, very strong. Yes, but as with all of humanity, there's also shadows, and I feel it's important to talk about the Shadow of Lemuria as well, because there's a lot of focusing on Atlantis and how that fell and how the Atlanteans were not very nice towards Lemurians, and there was a lot of not very nice things happening there, which I'm going to go into. But it's important to also own up to the feminine and our shadow sides, because the feminine is being kind of put on a pedestal and has been put on a pedestal for a long time. And the masculine is being really torn down and just put out in the shade, kind of. And I'm talking like in present time now with all these movements happening. And it's important to see things for the way they are, but it's also important to see your own shadow. And so the Lemurian, the Lemuria also fell. We always talk about Atlantis falling, but Lemuria also fell because it was it's like humanity as a concept or as a race in the galaxy of where we are right now. The polarity of masculine and feminine is the whole point of consciousness. The merging of those two are the key to evolution. That's kind of what I'm feeling and what I have felt. The key is integrating those two within yourself. And that is what has been trying to manifest through eons of time. In Lemuria, it was divine feminine order, trying out the full-on feminine. And with time, the shadows start to emerge. The kind of, the feminine shadows are very manipulative, negative emotions, jealousy, using sexuality as a weapon, being very a dark magic kind of thing, very what's the word? Manipulative is a good word, but that is kind of where, if you want to use a symbolic analogy with Eve and the snake. I'm not religious at all. It's just a symbol of that kind of energy of being tricked into something. That's the shadow side of the feminine. And the very destructive energy and very kind of power hungry, but in a more manipulative, emotional way. And so the shadow side of Lemuria started to really show sides of basically masculine, but distorted because of the feminine not being able to understand the masculine energy, trying to start leadership, trying to control, trying to create frames, trying to be leaders, but in a toxic masculine way, i.e. dictatorship. We are like the priestesses then, I'm not saying all of them, but there were, controlling. We say what is right, and if you don't like it, then you're not a part of this community. And because it was a community-based space, that was a very fearful thing to take in. Because if you're out of the community, then you die, basically, which, and that is also very present right now. People are very afraid of doing what they're supposed to do. They are very afraid of being their unique selves, because if I am cast out of my community, of my collective, my divine feminine group, i.e. the mother, the nurturing space, then I will die, because I need mothering. That is kind of what the inner child feminine, but it's not true. It's the illusion of being feared into doing this that you need to kind of face. And then this kind of led to Lemuria slowly falling at the same time as Atlantis started to rise, because that is like if Lemuria is very much feminine, then a counterpart started to emerge, which is Atlantis. And at the start of Atlantis, the focus on it was integration, was basically everybody is welcome here, and it is kind of then the divine masculine, clarity, discernment, what is actually true, really wanting to understand the truth of everything, going into the very fine detailed energy of truth and awareness and consciousness and light, and a glorious space of enlightened energy. I mean, it was that at the beginning. And there was a lot of Lemurians that fled, that were being hunted by this dark energy that started to happen there, that came to Atlantis. So the Atlantis empire in the beginning was a hodgepodge of all manner of beings, shapeshifters, because Lemuria was, this was present in Atlantis also, but Lemuria was very much shapeshifty energy because of the connection to nature, because you can be anything. If you feel like you are connected to energy in the nature, if you are nature, you can be anything in nature. Do you know what I mean? And so there was a lot of inflow there, and Atlantis started rising up, and with the intent of creating integration again. So then we moved from the feminine and swung over to the masculine, trying to create balance. But what happened, because there was just the one part, the one pole that was actually that was the masculine, was the residing power in the consciousness of the beings there. Then they lost the feminine, because the feminine, they were so wounded by this, the feminine darkness, that it was kind of cast out. And no, we're trying this instead. We're going all the way on to this end. If emotional and group space and all this doesn't work, we'll go on the exact opposite and do this instead. And so when Atlantis really flourished, there was a lot of work with crystals again that deepened, really, and they found ways to work with energy that was quite amazing. The alchemy of energies, and the knowledge of life, of really unlocking mysteries that was enormous. I know we spoke a bit about the god Thoth. I don't know how you say it in English. Thoth, the Egyptian god, which was actually, a lot of people say he was an Atlantean priest that had unlocked the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone, i.e. alchemy, or the key to life, basically. Symbolically, it means that he integrated within himself spirit, so he could sort of he wasn't bound by the physiology of life on Earth. And a lot of the Egyptian gods and goddesses do have animal connections, and I'm going to get back to that later. But he is an example of an Atlantean priest that really kind of worked with those kind of mysteries. And there's also there is texts that he has written that you can find if you Google Emerald Tablets of Thoth, that is said to hold the mysteries to this. But they're quite intense to read, so you can do it a little at a time. But yeah, so in Atlantis there was a lot of acceptance at first. The idea of everyone being equal. Everyone is allowed to be unique as well. You're allowed to be who you are. You're allowed to be your unique self, because that wasn't really there in Lemuria. It was a different energy. Both of them are needed, but here it's like on the opposite. If you were to take very earthy elements as a symbol, it would be capitalism and socialism, or communism. So in Atlantis, there is this, everyone is allowed to just do their own journey. And because of this, it's sort of turned into a quite hierarchical, is that how you say that? Hierarchy of space. There were a lot of Lemurian priests and priestesses coming from Lemuria and keeping going in Atlantis, but also people who it was a really flourishing state based on spirituality, knowledge, esoteric wisdom, crystal work, energy, and I mean, they unlocked the way to move heavy objects just by energy, because we know everything vibrates, and they knew how to do that. Let's see. But then what happened, what is mostly talked about today, the fall of Atlantis. This is also a civilization that lasted for a long, long, long time. So when you talk about the fall of Atlantis, it's kind of the end bit, just as the fall of Lemuria was the end bit. It's important to see because it depicts how you have to have both parts for it to stick. But at the end, the masculine polarity, it took over. It kind of, the masculine needs the feminine to balance himself, because the lack of emotional awareness becomes very cold, becomes very kind of focused on personal gain, power, and leadership, and harshness, very mind focused, very, very logical. So there have been, I know I've read countless witness and like people who have relived memories, and I have memories as well from this, of Lemurian shapeshifters and other, not only Lemurian but also other star beings coming into Earth, because this was a time, if you were to believe in this kind of depiction of creation, the Syrian, Pleiadian, Orion, and Lyran star people, beings coming to seed Earth with consciousness. And this masculine energy and the feminine energy is like the whole point of the experiment that is Earth as a school for souls. This is a challenge here, because we have to integrate emotion and soul, and it's like the hardest thing in the world to do. But anyway, so there were a lot of different people, and the processes that kind of took over in Atlantis was, they really wanted to understand. There was this enormous thirst for knowledge, enormous thirst to understand what is happening, what is beyond this, what is behind this, what if I open this up, what if I do this. So a lot of experiments started happening, a lot of dissections and really awful things started to happen, where Atlanteans used shapeshifters and other beings to find out how can you shift shape, how can you do this, how can you read minds, how can you live for 700 years, how can you, all of these different aspects. Typical Lemurian life expectancy is like 700 years. They were tall, they could change shapes, they could commune with animals, they could telepathically communicate a lot more than Atlanteans could, because they were so in tune, like the tree in Avatar, the sacred tree that they connect to. It's kind of like that. If you connect energetically to something, you can go and stand behind the eyes of it. And that's kind of how I work when I do my readings and I do my channelings and healings. I put myself behind another person's eyes and look through their aura, which is also part of the shamanic healing work. That's kind of, you look into the universe of another. And then the Atlanteans just wanted to understand how, because they wanted to use this in different ways. They wanted to harness the power. They wanted to work with it to create different energy aspects and infuse their crystals with it, and manipulate weather and flow and manifestation of abundance and all these things that were very. This is also like a pattern we can see today with trying to work with law of attraction to get money. There's a lot of this. Law of attraction, you can use it to get what you want, which is very low vibrational, basically. If you use something that is a universal law, you attract what you are. But if you use it to get more of something that is low vibrational, I'm not saying money in itself is low vibrational, but you know what I mean. That is, it's not spiritual or high vibrational just because you use law of attraction. You have to look at the intention behind. You have to look at, why am I doing this? What part of me wants this? Is this an ego part? What kind of energy am I putting into this manifestation that I'm doing? Anyway, side note. I hope all this makes sense. I'm just talking nonstop for 40 minutes. My God.
It's really interesting. Very interesting.
Wow. Well, yeah, I hope it is. I hope it is.
Because it's interesting to see, like, we talk a lot about the divine feminine and masculine, but this is giving it a little bit deeper roots and understanding it from a different perspective, and why there is this duality and sometimes a clash that needs to be like merged instead.
It's integration is the key.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of downloads happening after this Glastonbury trip, where I've been shown that there's this, it's so much bigger than just right now. The eons of time of this being a process is mind-boggling. This is a process that's been here from the beginning of Earth. And I'm sort of being shown that these two polarities, if you were to imagine, they are moving on one side. If you imagine a road, and on the one end of the road, on one side is the masculine, on the other side is the feminine. They're moving, and they are trying to merge. They're trying to meet in the middle of the road and walk together, but then something happens and they're being ripped apart again, because there needs to be some understanding of difference. There needs to be an allowance of difference. There's a lot of talking about this, and especially in Sweden, where we are extremely, we even have invented a word. I realize that this doesn't exist in other countries, but we've invented a word. I mean, you know this because you're Swedish as well. that is like, it's a sexless word for a person. Like you say he or she, but we have a third word that's been invented just so you don't have to stereotype or put a gender on a person, because you don't know what they identify as. If you're a kid, you talk about children as, if you were to, like, I'm just going to make up a word now, he, she, or fee, or something, you know. Then it's like, you don't know. Just because you have a penis doesn't make you a man. You might feel like a woman. So you don't use a gender stereotypical word to define the person before they say what they are, which in essence is very beautiful. But it's also like, it's become kind of forbidden to talk about the feminine masculine. And it's like, no, you can't say that. But you have to, because they are different. And the differences are what's beautiful, and they are so needed. But it doesn't mean that they're enemies. It doesn't mean that if you have one, you cannot have the other. Anyway, and so this time, it's been happening for so long. And Atlantis, Lemuria, if you go even further back, I mean, the star systems that we talk about, the Sirian and the Pleiadian and Lyra and all of these, the only other one that has polarities is Orion, as far as I know. The other ones are integrated, like Pleiadians and Sirians are integrated. They don't really understand why we have such a hard time. Why are we doing all this? They can't really, they are just what they are. But on Orion, there is this polarity of darkness and light, and feminine and masculine, which is also why there's a lot of wars happening there, which we could talk about another time, because that's a whole different story. But this really warlike energy that is on Earth is because of the polarities fighting. And humanity is being shown the key to this, which is union between these two polarities, emotion and logic, light and dark, Earth and the sun, movement and stillness, peace and conflict. Everything that is different needs to be integrated, like the yin and yang symbol. And it's not an easy thing to do, but like Atlantis and Lemuria, we've also, in recent times, I sort of got the connection. That was something that we were shown then. And then we got this two archetypes of divine feminine masculine that was coming into Earth a couple of thousand years ago. Christ consciousness. It was the Syrian and Pleiadian embodiment of divine masculine, divine feminine in the Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And regardless of your faith, regardless if you're religious or not, the people existed. We know that they existed. They were here. We know that these things, a lot of the things happen that are described, but you can look at it in a different way. They are basically archetypes showing us this is the divine masculine and this is the divine feminine. And here's all this wisdom. Here is all this key to your consciousness, which is what they both try to portray and convey, which has been distorted beyond measure by humanity, because, you know. So Jesus, basically, he was a great healer. He was a starseed, definitely. He was somebody who saw through the veil and had a very hard life because of this, because he had a purpose from so early on. You're here to do this, and you have no say. And just like, I mean, you can talk about him as this very divine figure, of very kind of, but he wasn't. He was like this badass person who just said exactly what he thought. He ripped apart everything that wasn't true. He angered a lot of people. He was killed because of this, because humanity couldn't cope with what he was showing. And this heart-based knowledge and wisdom is, if you disregard the religious. I am not at all talking about Christianity now. I really want to say that. I'm just talking about the person, because he wasn't Christian. The Christian part has been created by man after. That wasn't him. Just putting that out there. Anyway, so he was the divine masculine presence that was coming in to show humanity, okay, this is what is supposed to happen. Lead by your heart. The kingdom of heaven is within you. He said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the way. He did not mean him, as in Jesus, the person. He meant you are, as in consciousness, your own center, your own heart is the way. You have heaven within yourself. You are the universe incarnate here. Mary Magdalene, on the other hand, the Pleiadian incarnation, the way I see it, they are also, if you were to move back to the Egyptian, they are like Isis and Osiris. Oh, I left out Egypt. Oh, I have to go back there. There's too much, Shireen.
Yeah,
there's not enough
so
time.
We need to, definitely. We need to have more conversations. I would like to have like a whole conversation about Egypt as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
it's
because
so interesting.
Egypt, just putting it in there, is like after Atlantis fall, a lot of the survivors went to Egypt and settled there, and the pyramids and the Sphinx and all of these knowledges. The pyramids are directly aligned with Orion's belt. That was Atlantean star beings that came. And the gods and goddesses of Egypt that are shapeshifters, basically all of them have animal parts. Sekhmet is a lion, she's Lyran. Bast is also a Lyran. You have Tot, which is a bird, avian. But there are all these kind of patterns. So anyway, Mary Magdalene. She basically was the only one that understood the divine masculine part or mirror in Jesus, basically. She saw him for what he was, and she could mirror him, and that's why they sort of became this very strong connection. But because she was a woman, she wasn't really taken seriously. She wasn't listened to. She understood, which we have seen now with all these scrolls being found of her testament, of her witness. She knew what he meant. She knew that it meant this, the inner journey, the self-love, the offering of herself. She was the nurturer, the mother. She was extremely empathic, extremely supportive, as in the divine feminine, the reception, the passive, the just holder of space as well, but as a mother. And she's like an incarnation of Isis from before. So those two we were being served a depiction of divine masculine, divine feminine energy as a pattern for our conscious evolution. But what happened was that the feminine was erased. Mary Magdalene was erased and shunned, and has been called prostitute and all these things, which she was not. And there are a lot of sources now coming up saying that they were actually married and had children, and she moved to Glastonbury, and like, because but that is like, there's this timeline, I feel, of these two polarities being, we are getting examples of this all the time. And this, the key is not to look outside of yourself, but to look inside of yourself. How am I masculine? How am I feminine? And then you might need might need a mirror in relationship to find that part of yourself. Like I needed to, or in a romantic connection I had recently, where I also was very mirrored in my femininity. And before that, I couldn't connect with her because that's my full moon energy. I need to kind of have, before I can integrate, I need to have a mirror. But I'm starting to integrate now, so that's good. But yeah, and so we are heading towards a similar Atlantean fall energy, because we're so focused on technology, we're so focused on money, we're so focused on our own success that we lose track of our community, we lose track of our femininity, we lose track of heart. And the divine masculine needs the feminine's help. We need to embrace them. I mean, my heart bleeds for all the sensitive men who are out there and do not know that it's okay to cry, to be emotional, to have mothering feelings, to also feel like your feminine energy, it's okay to be held, it's okay to be intuitive, it's okay to be sensitive, because that does not make you less of a man. It has nothing to do with like this macho thing. Is the feminine trying to be masculine. Do you know what I mean when I say that? Yeah. It's like this extremely strong force trying to take on the role of provider, protector, nurturer. And it backfires because it's too strong. It doesn't have, we have another purpose as feminine. And so I mean, I feel like I want to like take an example from a wonderful light worker named Hannah Wilson, Instagram hand of Hannah. She does code work and channels codes, and she's brilliant. And she's talked a lot about this as well. And I've done a few activation sessions with her. And in one of them, she spoke about how you can see the evolution and emergence of consciousness in humankind as walking up a mountain. And when you're up at the mountain on the top, you will be ascended, if you want to use that word. And when you're up there, you have to have the whole of us with you. And so the divine feminine, having worked a lot with this, we've never really died. The divine feminine has been shunned and slaughtered and victimized, and in all manner of ways brutally cut down. But it's always been this presence, secret meetings and women communing, and it's never really gone away, But the divine masculine has sort of been eradicated. It has been absolutely extinct. And so because of this, it needs to be born again. It needs help from the feminine, the mothering energy, to be birthed. And it needs, and I'm not talking about men, I'm talking about this energy within ourselves, and also within the physical representation of men also. Because if the divine feminine walks up this mountain and stands on top, she's going to have to wait up there for the divine masculine to come up. She's not going to be able to ascend herself, because she's only one part of the whole. So it doesn't matter if we are all, the divine feminine, we're so awesome, we're all goddesses and doing this and awesome, If we do not have the divine masculine with us, it doesn't matter, because we will not rise up as one half of a whole. And so symbolically, we need to help this divine masculine energy go down and kind of lead them up. And again, it sounds like I'm talking about men. I'm not. Help help that energy to come up so that we are equal on this top of a mountain, and then be uplifted, basically.
And
And
that's
the way,
very beautiful. A
yeah,
beautiful way of like, it's not about even exactly, none of the energies should be too dominant. It should be
no,
equal and a balance. And I think
yeah,
that's so beautiful.
because it doesn't work if it's just one, which you've seen in Lemuria and Atlantis. And we see it now as well. We see that it's a very masculine presence in the world, focusing on money, focusing on power, focusing on conquests, on all of these things. And it you know, it needs to be, both of them needs to be appreciated for their unique abilities and their unique presence. And so I think it's important to talk about the beauty of the divine masculine, and not only talk about the masculine as a perpetrator or as a bad presence or as macho, or, you know, because the feminine, that is also the shadow side of the feminine. You know, like I talked about this of shunning and all men are bad, and this radical feminism kind of energy. I don't think that's helpful. I think we need to embrace within ourselves, but also without the sensitivity, and welcome, so that more and also put in boundaries. What is the divine masculine? What do we as women want? What do all feminine energies want as a divine masculine? And just acknowledge and focus and really uplift that kind of energy. The very gentle and supportive and loving energy.
Thank you so much. That is so beautifully put, and it was a really great insight, I think, for all of us. Like the thread from what you talked about in the beginning and to this. I'm so grateful for your time and presence on the podcast.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful, and we for sure have so much more to talk about. So we will definitely have more talks.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, and I love your work, like the smudge fans that you do and everything. So I will link your Facebook and Instagram
thank you.
to the podcast as well, so people can find you and see how they can work with you as well.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. And so much fun to talk about this.
Yeah, this is so
I think
beautiful.
it is important to get this out there. And looking forward to talk about all matter of occult things.
Yes, so important and so exciting too.
Yes.
Thank you so much. You are so appreciated.
Oh, thank you. You too.
Yeah, thank you. This conversation was so amazing for me, and I felt like this was a huge just channeling and transmission from Emma, and I'm really grateful for the conversation, and I hope that this has just brought some more wisdom into your life and can help you to tap into this great wisdom and knowledge and everything that you have within yourself, and to explore more and to find more answers both within you and in these ancient texts and ancient knowledge that just has been left for us to learn from. So I'm so grateful that you're here, and I hope that this episode can help you on your journey. So let's take a deep breath in through the nose and exhale through the mouth. And thank you so much for your presence. Namaste.